Thanks for joining us for Storm Watch. Of course, we begin with the tropics tonight. Very important story on Hurricane Keith, which has already caused big problems over the Yucatan. Will it affect the United States, and is there something else out there south of Cuba that may affect us even earlier? Let's find out with our hurricane expert, John Hope.
Well, thank you, Jim Cantori. And whether it will affect the United States, we're going to have to wait a while and see. It'll have to start moving somewhere if it does. It's been stationary, almost absolutely stationary for the last 24 hours, just off the east coast of Belize and the Yucatan Peninsula, right at the mouth of Chetumal Bay, and it hasn't really moved at all. The one big change, though, in the last 24 hours has been a very steady weakening. It's down now to just barely a hurricane, 75 miles an hour. Let me go ahead and show you the overall picture there as we take a peek out across the Atlantic. And this is the hurricane down here over the Yucatan Peninsula. This tropical wave now in the Caribbean, that's the remnants of what was Tropical Depression Joyce. I couldn't find any circulation out there, so that was downgraded to a tropical depression. Pretty healthy wave, incidentally, coming off the coast of Africa. But we have another area that Jim Cantori mentioned. It's a widespread area of heavy showers extending from the Caribbean across Cuba into southern Florida. I don't see anything going on there yet in the way of a surface development, but that is something we're going to have to watch. At 1 o'clock, Keith was centered at 17.7, 87.9. That was just 30 miles east-northeast of Belize City. Belize City's been getting about as much wind today as they've had any time of the hurricane. I've seen gusts up to about 55 miles an hour. It's stationary, and the pressure now is actually up a little bit. It's up to 984 millibars, I believe, is the last one, just measured here by the reconnaissance aircraft. Again, not moving at all, and hasn't moved all day. It didn't move last night. We still have out some hurricane warnings from along the entire coast of Belize, up across the eastern coast of the Yucatan Peninsula. I think it's very likely these are going to be changed to tropical storm warnings on the next advisory. We don't know that for sure, but we're sort of anticipating that. And it's a borderline now, I think, whether they're going to call this a hurricane next time or a tropical storm. If it is a hurricane, it is just barely one. Now, that center of circulation is right there, just about on the coast, but not really inland. It never has really gone inland. It's a lot more difficult to see than it was yesterday. Yesterday, it stood out, and we could see it very well. So we do expect to see it begin some movement, and when it does move, we expect it to come out in the Gulf of Mexico. Well, it looks as if it's going to be over the Yucatan Peninsula for the better part of the next 48 hours. So if I were living up along the North Gulf Coast, I wouldn't worry about it yet. I would just kind of watch things. The wave coming through the Caribbean, this was a Tropical Depression George, just an open wave now. No chance of development where it is. Some chance, though, I think, of development when it gets farther west in the western Caribbean in a day or two. That's it for this time. Now back to Jim.
Thank you very much, John. Of course, in the meantime, we watch South Florida for you. A very heavy dose of rain coming in. Already flood watches out for Miami-Dade, Broward counties, Lee and Collier counties. And we will see quite a bit of rainfall in the Keys as well. The big question is, will it require a flash flood watch? The guidance that they use for flash flooding here is much higher than they do over the interior, so they may or may not issue flash flood watches. Needless to say, a rainy night in South Florida.
Well, Keith is once again a tropical storm and threatening a portion of the Mexican coast. Now in the Bay of Campeche, our own expert, our tropical expert, Dr. Steve Lyons, is standing by. He has the latest detail.
Well, thanks, Sharon, and it's showing signs of strengthening. Reconnaissance is out there and measuring pressure drops as we speak. Let me show you the latest information from the Hurricane Center. As of 4 p.m. Central Daylight Time, location was 20.4 north, 94.1 west. Moving to the west-northwest at 12 miles per hour, you can see the track here through time. West-northwest would take it generally toward Tampico, Mexico. Within 24 hours, it would landfall. However, the official track does not go continuing on that track. It takes it more northwest up toward the northern portion of Mexico through time. Winds are currently 50 miles per hour, and you can see from the satellite imagery on the infrared a tremendous burst in deep thunderstorms, and a lot of this is high cloud bursting away from the center. But in these burst phases, we usually see curtailed development followed by deepening. So we could see this deepening to close to hurricane strength tonight. And we do expect it to become a hurricane before it makes landfall over the next 24 to 36 hours. Now let me show you the official projected path. And there are a couple of things you need to know about this. First of all, if it takes a more westward path, it is overland very quickly. It landfalls sooner and it has less time to develop. If it takes a more northward track, it stays over water longer, has more time to become a hurricane or a stronger hurricane, and landfalls obviously farther north. Another thing is near the end of the track, notice a 24-hour period of movement here is very short, which means that cold front's going to come down here near the tail end of it and put a stop on its motion. And so in northern Mexico and potentially southern Texas, if it moves that far north, we could get some fairly heavy rain that could be very persistent over a couple of days. Now, we do have hurricane advisories out. Hurricane watch.
Good afternoon to you. Thanks so much for joining us for Storm Watch. We have some very cold air heading southward across the states. More about that in a second. Right now, though, we want to have a complete look at our tropical weather, where we do have a hurricane out there as well as a tropical storm. The latest on the tropics, let's head over to our expert desk with our hurricane expert, John Hope.
Well, thanks a lot, Rich. And the eye of Hurricane Keith is now well inland in Mexico, where it's going to weaken very rapidly now as it continues to move on toward the west-northwest. The only remaining factor about it that we're concerned about is heavy rain, mainly in northern Mexico, but some of that may spread across the river into Texas. This is the latest information we have on Hurricane Keith at 1 o'clock, centered at 22.6, 97.9. That was 30 miles north-northwest of Tampico, wind still 90. But as I indicated, they're going to be diminishing very rapidly. We can see on the radar now out of Tampico that the eye is well inland. And the wind at Tampico has actually shifted all the way around the south. That also tells us that the eye is well inland and continues to move toward the west-northwest. These warnings that we have along the coast, we expect most of those to be changed to tropical storm or lowered altogether late this afternoon or early this evening, so we won't have to worry about those any longer. Now, looking at the visible satellite picture, you can kind of see where the eye is, right about here. It moves inland just north of Tampico, and at Tampico this afternoon, we saw winds reported about up to hurricane force in the gust. Looking now at the combination picture of the radar and satellite, if you look carefully down here, north of where it says Tampico, you can see on the last frame where the eye of it is, where the eye of the hurricane is. You can't see the whole eye because it's beyond the range of the radar. And all this precipitation is moving inland where it's going to be very, very heavy. Not much of it headed up yet toward the river, but we expect some of that will be crossing into Texas before the night is over. Now, we have another tropical storm out here. This one is Leslie. It was the subtropical depression we had out in the Atlantic. It was upgraded to a tropical storm this morning, and the winds are just 40 miles an hour. It's actually 700 miles from Bermuda, but it's over 300 miles east of Jacksonville, Florida. It's moving away from the United States, so we don't have to worry about that at all. In fact, unless it gets better organized, nobody will have to worry about it very much. The circulation center is out here all by itself, apart from all the thunderstorm clouds, and that means it's a very disorganized system and not getting any stronger. Now, the only populated place that might possibly be affected would be Bermuda, and we'll have to wait and see about that. But so far, we're not talking about a very strong system at all. Off the coast of Mexico, we have a tropical storm, winds 65 miles an hour. Certainly isn't getting any better organized with time either, because that also is undergoing some shear. That's it for this time. Now back to Rich.
All right, thank you, John, for that.
And welcome back. The Storm Watch is brought to you today by Rayovac. Well, we have some colder air heading across the country. Temperatures have been plunging from Dallas to Little Rock and even into Nashville, and all of that is heading southward. We'll have more on that coming up in just a few moments. But first, we want to check on the tropics, and to do that, here's John Hope.
Well, thank you, Kristen. In spite of all that cold air advancing through the U.S., we still have to concern ourselves a little bit with the tropics. But we don't see anything out there that's immediately threatening. We're glad to be able to tell you that. Let's have a quick look at what we do have here. In the overall picture, you can't see it on the left of your picture here, but the remnants of Keith are in Mexico. Some of those showers now are spread across the river up into Texas. This is Leslie out here, several hundred miles to the east of Bermuda. That's a very, very weak tropical storm, and certainly is not getting any stronger as time goes by. We have